Hey, y'all, each week on The Sam Sanders Show from KCRW, we ask big questions and share hot takes about the pop culture we love.
Now that we have YouTube, we don't need any more biopics. If they've been alive such that I can watch them on YouTube, I don't need it.
I don't think that music is getting worse. I think y'all just don't listen to artists who aren't in the mainstream.
Taylor Swift, retire. It's time to retire.
The Sam Sanders Show from KCRW, wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube.
As he came nearer and nearer to dying or doing some other irreversible damage to himself, I felt that I was a terrible father. I wasn't able to protect my son.
This is Life in 7 Songs from the San Francisco Standard. I'm Sophie Behrman. This week, I'm speaking with the best-selling author and journalist David Sheff, whose most recent book is a biography of the musician Yoko Ono. But you might know his work best from his memoir, Beautiful Boy, a father's journey through his son's addiction, a #1 New York Times bestseller that was also named Best Nonfiction Book of the Year by Entertainment Weekly in 2008. The book was later made into a film called Beautiful Boy, starring Steve Carell and Timothée Chalamet. What makes David's voice so powerful is that it comes from being a parent, not a professional. And one note you'll notice in this episode, David shares 6 songs, not 7. David Sheff, welcome to the show.
Sophie, thank you so much.
So, David, let's go to a song right away, because your memoir, Beautiful Boy, it's in reference to a John Lennon song, right?
Yeah, I was there when John sang that song in the recording studio that's on the record. It's this beautiful lullaby that he wrote for his son. And I ended up singing that song to my son when he was born, and then later to my daughter, with the lyrics changed a little bit to Beautiful Girl, and then to my other son as well. And I was like countless other parents who sang that song to their children. I mean, it became a lullaby that we expressed our love. And it's also a very poignant song in that it talks about, hold my hand when you cross the street. Life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans. I mean, it really talks about what it is like to be a parent and to be worried about your child and to want to protect them. So I loved it when I first heard it, when it was written, and then it became part of the soundtrack of my life as a father. It's this beautiful, joyful celebration, but it also comes with great sadness when I hear it, because it was the story of my beautiful boy who I almost lost.
Close your eyes. Have no fear. The monster's gone. He's on the run, and your daddy's here. Beautiful, 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 beautiful boy.
John ends the song speaking directly to Sean, his son. Darling, darling, darling Sean. Good night, Sean. See you in the morning. And whenever I hear that, it just breaks my heart because, of course, Sean lost his father.
And John Lennon's murder, that happened shortly after you'd spent 3 weeks interviewing John and Yoko.
Yeah. I got a call. It was December 7th, 1980, and I got a call from Yoko and John to tell me that they'd read the interview and they were pleased with it, which was nice. And then later, I was watching football, and Howard Cosell, the announcer, interrupted the game to say that John Lennon had been shot and killed. And I, of course, was completely blown away and just devastated. I flew to New York that night, and there was a gathering in Central Park. People were just crying and singing John's songs, and I joined them. And about a week later, I actually went to see Yoko. And that was when I think the beginning of our friendship started. We cried together and talked a little bit. But I think it was really meaningful to her that I had spent those 3 weeks with her and John at a time of their life when they were happy. I ended up going back to see her frequently, and eventually, over time, we became very good friends.
And now, of course, you've just written Yoko. That's a definitive biography of her life. But how did you first even get in contact with Yoko Ono and John? Because you were really just starting your journalism career, right?
Well, I actually fell into journalism. I went to college in Berkeley, and in San Francisco, there was a startup magazine that I worked for as an intern and then as an assistant editor. And And at the same time, I was doing my best to break into some of the bigger magazines. But I was in New York working on a story, and I convinced the editor of Playboy magazine to let me come see him. While I was there, I convinced him to give me an assignment, and he asked me to interview, actually, it was John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, who were coming out with the Blues Brothers movie at that time. As I was leaving his office, he said, "Oh, by the way, do you have any way to get to John Lennon?" And I didn't, but I was 24 years old, and I didn't know any better, I guess, or maybe I did. But either way, I said, sure, I can do that. And I got in touch with everybody I knew in the music business and wrote letters and sent telegrams. And then one day I got a phone call from somebody who said he worked with Yoko and asked me when I was born and where I was born. I told him, and apparently based on my numerological chart and my horoscope, Yoko gave me the go-ahead. When I finally met her, she told me that my number was the same as John's, which is number 9, which he used in Revolution number 9 and other songs of his.
The stars literally aligned. I know that's corny, but in this case.
No, it's true. It's exactly right. And suddenly I was sitting across from John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and we began what was 3 weeks of interviews.
You actually chose a Yoko Ono song as one of your 7. So tell me which one you chose and why.
Well, one of the things about Yoko is within the avant-garde art world, which is a rarefied world, she was emerging as an artist through the 1960s. And she then got together with one of the biggest celebrities, stars, whatever, in the world at the peak of Beatlemania. And so she was introduced to a mass audience, not because of an organic way that her work was appreciated. So the people who were listening to, All You Need Is Love and She Loves You, and I mean, all the Beatles songs were introduced to Yoko's music, and Yoko's music is completely wild. When I finally got over my sort of resistance to really listening, it thrilled me. It was this pure expression of everything, of joy, of love, but also of a lot of pain, which Yoko carried with her. And that song in particular, the song Why, was on the Yoko Ono Plastic Ono Band record, her first solo album. And that record is still my favorites. I mean, the album is one of my favorite albums, and on that album, the song Why is remarkable. It is Yoko repeating the word why over and over and over again. No, it still gives me chills. What I came to understand was that it was why it meant so many different things. It was, why life and why death, why pain, why suffering. And as I said, she suffered a lot. And so it was really crying out in many different ways. And it's followed by another song on the album called Why Not, which I think is kind of great. It's the universe's response when you ask why. I mean, there's really no real ultimate answer. A lot of people I talked to researching the biography about Yoko cited that particular album and this song as a huge influence on them. And there were people like David Byrne and Lady Gaga and Laurie Anderson and RZA and Kim Gordon and Thurston Moore, Sonic Youth. So it really ended up being really an influential record. So it wasn't just me.
David, why do you think Yoko chose you, or I guess trusted you to write about her for all these years?
Well, beyond
numerology.
Beyond my birth sign and my number. Well, I was with her at the hardest time of her life, and she was a good friend to me. It wasn't just a one-way street. It wasn't just that, I was supporting her as much as I could. I mean, I tried. But she was really supportive of me, too, because it wasn't a great time in my life. I had a very difficult divorce. And then later, sort of the most, I guess, dramatic time she stepped in as a friend and a really loyal friend was when my oldest son, Nick, as a teenager and then in his early 20s, he became addicted to drugs, to methamphetamine and heroin and other drugs. And at one point he was on the street in San Francisco, and Yoko, with her son Sean, were visiting San Francisco. And when they learned about what was going on with Nick, they were able to get in touch with him and get him to come see them. And Yoko scooped him up and put him on a plane and brought him back with her to New York. And he stayed with her at her apartment at the Dakota, and then she took him up to her farm up in upstate New York, got him into treatment for his addiction, got him to see a psychiatrist. People have these ideas about Yoko as if she, I think it's surprising for people to hear how giving she was and what a loyal and kind friend she was.
David, it's so full circle because the song that you pegged to your childhood comes from the Beatles. It's Strawberry Fields Forever. Why did you choose that one?
Well, I was a sort of alienated, lonely, angsty teenager. I was born in Boston, and I grew up there for a while, but then we moved to Arizona, which was incredibly conservative. I felt lost, and I was one of those kids. And I was up late one night, and there was an FM radio station that was, this really cool DJ who would just talk all night and play records. And he one night announced that he had this new record from the Beatles and put Strawberry Fields Forever on, and he played it. And it was like being saved. I mean, in some way, I related so intensely to that song. John sings, "No one I think is in my tree. I must be high or low." Well, I didn't think anyone was in my tree either. I thought I was, sort of the stranger in a strange land. So it spoke to me. And, it also has this optimism. He concludes, some of the verses with, it's all right. It's going to be okay. And that was a message that I really needed to hear as well. And come on, it's just one of the greatest songs ever written.
Living is easy with eyes closed. Misunderstanding all you see. It's getting hard to be someone, but it all works out. It doesn't matter much to me. Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to.
Yeah, living is easy with eyes closed, misunderstanding all you see. That was another line in that song that really meant a lot to me because I was just trying to figure out, who I was and what I wanted and what life was all about. And I saw what I considered to be, sort of this conservative way of living that I just didn't want any part of it. And so this idea of living is easy with eyes closed, I mean, I was determined not to do that, to live with my eyes open, even though, as I learned over time, it's not always easy.
Tell me about your fourth song, Astral Weeks by Van Morrison.
Well, I was, in Arizona and miserable. And one weekend, a friend of mine and I got in his car and we drove all night to San Francisco. It was a foggy morning and we somehow ended up at the top of Twin Peaks just as the sun was rising through the fog. And I just felt I could breathe after being in 120 degree Arizona weather. And of course, culturally, I felt like I could breathe as well when I got to know the city and spend time in San Francisco. And that's when I first heard Astral Weeks by Van Morrison. And so for me, it's sort of inextricably tied to a time in my life when I finally found a place to live. I'm nothing but a stranger in the world, Van sings, and that's how I felt. And he talks about being born again. But, he's not talking about being born again in religion. He's talking about being born in a spiritual way. It's always been one of my favorite songs, and I still listen to it a lot. And I was able to turn on my kids to it. I mean, it means a lot to me.
Ain't nothing but a stranger in this world. I'm nothing but a stranger in this world. I got home on high. In another land, so far away.
Oh, that one almost makes me want to cry. It's so beautiful. His voice is this amazing, beautiful instrument, and I kind of go right in there with him, and he can take me sort of wherever he wants to go. And to me, it was being alive again.
It's time for a quick break. When we come back, David takes us on his journey to fatherhood. Stay with us. Hey everyone, I want to recommend a podcast. Hard Knocks is a show about resilience, self-discovery, and finding meaning after chaos, hosted by Amanda Knox. Each week, Amanda sits down with fascinating guests, writers, thinkers, artists, to explore how we learn, grow, and rebuild ourselves after life knocks us down. Amanda brings humor, honesty, and hard-earned perspective to every conversation, drawing on her own experience of being wrongfully convicted and rebuilding her life. Amanda was a guest on Life in 7 Songs in one of our most moving episodes, opening up about how music became a lifeline during her years of wrongful imprisonment. On our show, she spoke candidly about turning pain into wisdom and also about how we're all so much more than our worst moments. If you liked that episode, you'll love her show, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
I'm Jesse Alejandro Cottrell.
And I'm Emily Dreyfus, and this is Pacific Standard Time.
We have stories from all over the state of California, all the big battles that are happening here.
Prop 50,
housing affordability,
tech,
and immigration.
And we're really excited to bring you the stories about how California is dealing with what it means to be alive in 2025.
Subscribe to Pacific Standard Time, a new weekly show from the San Francisco Standard.
We'll have new episodes every Wednesday starting November 19th, wherever you get your podcasts.
You have 3 children, Nick, Jasper, and Daisy. Did you always know you wanted to be a parent?
I never thought about it, actually, until I think that I was with John and Yoko in 1980. They were great artists, and they had, unlimited money and all the things that people think are important. And they talked a lot about how that did not make them content at all. They both were really struggling. They both were unhappy. They both felt alienated. And it was only when they gave all that up for a while and lived a very quiet life at home and then eventually had a child, Sean Lennon, that they found some peace. And I saw John in particular was the one of the two who really raised Sean. I mean, he called himself the house husband. He stopped making music. He stopped doing interviews until Sean was 5 years old. And it was so much fun to be around the two of them together. John lit up. It was absolutely what he loved more than anything in the world, was being a dad. And they played together. John read Sean stories and told him stories and played him songs with his guitar. And they had a room right next to the main kitchen that used to be their dining room, but had been converted into some giant playroom. And there was a circus trampoline in the middle of that room, and John and Sean would be bouncing on that. And it was heaven to watch. And this was a person who had been lost. John said that he wrote the song Help because he was crying out for help, because he was miserable. And the John Lennon that I saw when he was with his son, was not miserable at all. He was thrilled. And suddenly it opened me up to the idea of being a father, and I saw what it could mean to be a father. And a couple of years later, my son Nick was born, and I got it instantly. I loved being a father more than anything I'd ever done.
So, David, your memoir, it's called Beautiful Boy, A Father's Journey Through His Son's Addiction. How did that journey begin?
When I finally became a father, my son Nick was my beautiful boy. And I sang him that song all the time, every night before he went to bed. And I mean, he was an amazing kid. I mean, I'm his dad, so I'm probably a little bit prejudiced there, but he was just this lovely, lovely child. I thought I had prepared him for the world of drugs, and I wasn't naive about drugs. I did a lot of drugs when I was young. And so I thought I would have some credibility when I talked to Nick about drugs. My college roommate ended up overdosing and dying. So I was completely blindsided when I found that Nick was smoking pot when he was only 11 years old. But I met with his teacher and the school counselor, and they told me, don't worry, Nick's a great kid. He's fine. Kids experiment. It's a rite of passage. And that's exactly what I wanted to hear, that Nick was fine. And of course, he wasn't. Over the course of high school, his drug use continued, and then he ended up using harder drugs, and he ended up becoming addicted to methamphetamine and heroin and other drugs as well. And it was a decade of hell having a child who was addicted. This idea of John singing, hold my hand when you cross the street, well, I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't help him. And I did everything I could to try to help him. And that was my life, really, for 10 years. And I wanted to write about it because I had thought this was the kind of thing that could never happen to me. I mean, I had an image of what drug addicts, look like, and they didn't look like my son. And I think most people feel that way. So I wanted people to know this can look like anybody. And that became the book, Beautiful Boy. And when people read that story, I heard from many, many thousands of people who communicated with me that they too were dealing with addiction in their family, whether it was their child or their husband or their wife or their partner or their parent or brother or sister, whoever it was. People always say the same thing. It's sort of like, your story is our story, your family's story is our story. But a lot of times the stories are tragic because ultimately Nick got in recovery and he's been sober now for about 13 years. But a lot of these people are losing their children, and it's just a tragedy, of course.
I'm sure with addiction, there are just countless painful moments and lowest lows that just keep getting lower. But I'm curious if you're willing to share a story that sticks out that was particularly painful from Nick's darker times.
It was 10 years of dark times. Of every time I thought it couldn't get worse, it did. The way I found out that he was actually using the needles was I got a call one day from an emergency room doctor who told me that Nick was in the emergency room and they thought they were going to have to amputate his arm because of it had become infected from shooting up drugs. So that was the first time I knew that Nick was, injecting this poison into his arms. That was terrifying, and the doctor was able to save his arm. So, that was the good part of the story, but it was terrifying. I would go out in the middle of the night sometimes trying to find him because I sort of knew the neighborhoods where he might hang out in San Francisco. And it was, fool's errand to try to find a child who doesn't want to be found. I mean, it was living with the idea that he could die anytime for all those years. That's what it's like to live with somebody who is addicted. We just don't know. And like I learned that there's only so much we could do. And so it's a really helpless feeling to feel that you could lose somebody that you love to drugs.
In your memoir, you write that your relationship with music changed during this whole period. How so?
Well, one of the great things about being a parent, I guess, I don't know if other people feel this way as well, is sharing, the music we love with our children. And so when Nick was gone and I was terrified, a song would come on the radio and I would just lose it. Actually, one time I was with Daisy, my daughter, in a store, and just over the sound system, the song Tears in Heaven by Eric Clapton came on. And it's about Eric Clapton's son dying. And I just lost it in the store, and poor Daisy was appalled. It could happen with any song, but especially if it was a song that connected to Nick in some ways for me. In the book, I think I warned parents. I say, be careful what you listen to.
You chose Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit, but covered by Patti Smith as your next song. Tell me about choosing that one.
Well, it was a really big song for us. It's this exuberant, radical, angry song that was one that I associated with Nick when he was struggling as a teenager. As Nick grew older, he had really great taste in music, and he just as I originally introduced him to music, he introduced me to a lot of music. And Nick was the one who turned me on to Nirvana, and we were sort of obsessed together. And I took Nick to see Nirvana in concert, and it was this rage that came out of Kurt Cobain. It was just riveting and haunting. And the song took on new meaning when Nick was using drugs, because it was one of those that really was connected in my mind to Nick, and sort of the rebellion that was expressed in that song was part of what I felt Nick was experiencing and feeling. I feel stupid and contagious, here we are now, entertain us, was this crying out, and I felt that Nick was crying out.
With the lights out, it's less dangerous. Here we are now, entertain us. I feel stupid and contagious. Here we are now, entertain us. I'm alive too.
The other thing, of course, happened after Nick and I went to see Nirvana was the next year, actually, Nick came home from school one day and told me that Kurt Cobain was dead and he'd killed himself. So there's a real darkness that comes along with that as well. And when I heard Patti Smith's cover of that song, it really expresses that sadness in the way that she communicates. You know, she's brilliant and I love her.
David, did you ever feel like you were responsible for what happened to Nick?
I did. I thought that I did something wrong and I felt judged. I felt ashamed. I racked my brain to figure out what had gone wrong and what did I do. His mom and I had a very difficult divorce when Nick was young, and so I thought, you know, I blamed that for Nick's unhappiness that led him to his drug use. I had done a lot of drugs, as I said earlier, and thought that somehow I influenced him in some ways. I mean, I didn't do drugs in front of him or anything like that, but still, somehow I felt that there was the connection there. And as he came nearer and nearer to dying or doing some other irreversible damage to himself, I felt that I was a terrible father. I wasn't able to protect my son. And I know it's a common feeling that people have because we so badly want to protect our children, but sometimes we can't.
I can't imagine how hard that must have been. I just had a daughter. She's only 5 months old, but you never picture that can happen. And of course it can.
The other side of the hell of addiction is the amazing, incredible joy of recovery. Sort of the amazing thing now is that I said that I sang Beautiful Boy to Nick when he was little. And now Nick has a baby and yours is 5 months old. Nick's baby is 7.5 months old. And I am already singing that song to this little beautiful boy. And people who go into recovery are some of the most amazing people I've ever met. They've been through hell, they've been through the gauntlet, and they survived it. And they come out, appreciating life and appreciating their loved ones in ways that maybe they never would have without having gone through what they went through. And that happened with Nick. And it took a long time to rebuild our relationship, but now I see him all the time. I talk to him all the time. He lives not that far from where I am, and he has this little baby. And so we take walks on the beach a few times a week. And Nick has, his baby in a snuggly pack, and it's heaven.
Your last song, you chose a Talking Heads song. Tell me what you chose.
Well, I chose This Must Be the Place by Talking Heads. I talked about how unhappy I was growing up and how much time I spent searching for an answer. And the answer that I came to is expressed in that song, by David Byrne. He says, "Home is where I want to be. Pick me up and turn me around. I feel numb, born with a weak heart. I guess I must be having fun." I mean, home is where I want to be, and that's exactly how I feel.
There was a time before we were born. Someone asked, "This is where I'll be, where I'll be." Oh, we're just getting out. Oh.
It's such a beautiful song. I, had to have this one in there because it is still, when I hear it, it brings back everything. And it comes full circle. I mean, this idea of searching, this idea of suffering, and this idea of struggling, and then finally coming home. With my wife, my children are now not home. They're off into the world. But the idea of having been through what our family has been through, which is a lot, coming to some place of peace after all that is incredibly meaningful. And I feel peace when I hear that song.
This whole interview to me is about parenthood. Your love for your children is everything.
I mean, with the hard stuff that we went through, one of the lessons that I learned it the hard way because there were times when I wanted to give up on Nick, but I never could. And that bond between parent and child is everything. When Nick was little, as he was growing up, when he would leave to go spend time with his mom, I said to him, everything. And he said to me, everything. And it was our way of just saying everything. I will miss you. I love you. You are everything to me. I hope that maybe, the joy in our relationship and the dedication as a father, is something that he learned. And I kind of think he did. I mean, to see him with that baby it's just so much joy. I mean, he carries that joy with him, and he carries it with him as a dad. I wouldn't take it for granted anyway, but because I almost lost him, I didn't think he was going to make it to 21 years old, and he just celebrated his 43rd birthday. So it feels like a miracle. He's just grown into this amazing person.
David, thank you so much for sharing your songs.
And thank you, Sophie. It's been amazing to talk to you.
Life in 7 Songs is a production from the San Francisco Standard. If you enjoyed this episode, you might love our interviews with Chesa Boudin and Daniel Handler. Both explore themes of what it means to be a parent, so check those out. This episode was produced by me, Sophie Behrman, by Michelle Lanz, and by our senior producer, Jasmine Morris. Our executive producers are Griffin Gaffney and John Steinberg. This episode was mixed by Michelle Lanz. Our theme music is by Kate Davis and Zubin Hensler, and Clark Miller created our show art. Our music consultant is Sarah Tembekshian. You can find this guest's full playlist at sf.news/Spotify. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.